Welcome back to Outrage Science Bites. I'm David Beckmeyer, and this is day 27 of our 30-day challenge, continuing our deep dive into bridging our divides. We answered a version of this crucial question on day 9 with Kamy Akhavan, and now we're returning to it from a new perspective. We've talked about how disinformation fuels the very conflicts we're trying to resolve, but challenging someone's facts can often feel like challenging them, causing them to dig in deeper. Our audience question today is, what are ways to address disinformation without alienating those who value their own facts? Answering that for us is Kate Ullman, lifelong educator and executive director of the legislative semester. Here's Kate.
When I thought about that in the context of students and the way they're using information together to deliberate about policy, it made me think about how the interaction is a really big piece of it. The in-person, face-to-face interaction creates a level of accountability for the information you're sharing that you don't always get when you're just sharing a link or sharing something on social media. And I think that the sort of spread of disinformation is facilitated by people not really being accountable for sharing good information. And in a classroom or in a school setting, what happens is that students do research, they come in, they bring a statistic or a quote, and if it's not really a valid piece of evidence, the other students will just say to them in person, face to face, like, well, where'd you get that? Like, what was your source for that? I don't think that's true. Can you verify that? There's just this level of accountability that I think few of us really face generally in our lives when we're sharing information. And I think just a theme through all of this is face-to-face or in-person interaction is the antidote to so many of the problems that we're facing because of the accountability, the social accountability it creates between people. And, if you share something on Facebook, you might not say that to someone's face. If you share, some information or an allegation or a statement or a position you take anonymously or even not anonymously, but just digitally is really different than a conversation. So I think just, that's something that I see happening in schools and in classrooms, that the social accountability plays an important role. And something that I think we can all learn is that we just have to get out from behind the screens and interact with people face to face is probably the number one thing that we could do to kind of bring down the temperature, because people just generally they don't treat each other the same way face to face as they would in an online environment. And I think even stepping it back further and starting with your closest friends, and people who you think that you agree on everything, but surely you can find things you disagree about, right? And so that's a great practice because it's someone who you're invested in a relationship, you trust them, you respect them. And if you can find something to talk about, it's a great opportunity to build the skills. And then, like you said, step it up before you go to the person who's your perfect vision of someone who's the polar opposite of you. Right? Yeah. And I think, and again, that's where I think students, that there's that one quote where the student said, these are people I already know and respect. They're getting a chance to practice this with kids they've been in school with for 10 years. They're on a basketball team together. And then they're like, oh, really? You and I have different views about gun control? Huh, surprising. I think they can approach it with more curiosity then, rather than animosity that sometimes rises up more quickly. So
that's all for today's episode of Outrage Science Bites. Stay curious, and until next time, I'm David Beckmeyer. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy these Science Bites episodes, you may enjoy the long-form Outrage Overload podcast at outrageoverload.net.